left. So I think what we're saying is there's incredibly powerful, effective legislation and policy in place. We actually have a tremendous amount of BE practitioners, skilled practitioners. We unfortunately have a massive unemployment problem. We have a tremendous amount of small businesses, both informal as well as small businesses that are failing or struggling to survive. So whilst we have the mechanisms and the funding in place and the capabilities, what we want to talk through very briefly now is how do we drive exponential change, exponential empowerment, and look at it as an ecosystem. So if you can go to the next slide, please, Tanya. So really, I mean, the fundamental still is we really should shift to a strategic conversation. Let's use compliance as a strategic tool, and let's make sure that we shift from a more linear, incremental mindset where every project maybe gives you 10 or 20 or even 100% return to how do we get that 10x, and how do we use the power of technology and new business models, the exponential innovation capabilities, to empower the skills in the SMEs, again, giving them a 10x and ultimately giving the ecosystem a 10x. Next slide, please. So the opportunity, and we've put a lot of thought and experimentation and refinement into understanding the ecosystem and how do we go about this. And large corporates globally and locally, they are all going on through these transformation exercises. They're all looking at how do they leverage technology, 4IR, all these buzzwords, but meaningfully, they're looking at it and saying, how do we get that 10x, that multiplier? What's important, and the way they go about doing that is they look at the future. They set a direction, right? So there's got to be a longer term outcome and direction that you're setting. And it needs to be a mission. It needs to be something that is common, that galvanizes the ecosystem in a common direction, right? So the first step that we need to look at is how do we set that future and then look at the next step. So think big, start small, but create as a mission that galvanizes the ecosystem and transforms the ecosystem holistically. So that's one of the critical things that we see to be able to address our unemployment and specifically address the small, medium, micro enterprise sector. And obviously to do that, the other critical things is we've got to get the right principles in place. So things like inclusivity, it has to be shared. It has to be inclusive. It's not about the little startup and entrepreneur disrupting the big guy necessarily. Why don't we find a way to say, well, how do we get that entrepreneur who's able to create a disruptive innovation that drives growth, but how do we make sure that it's inclusive and that the small guys that don't have access to all the funding actually participate in the wealth creation, as well as obviously the participation and access to the market. And to do that, it's very simple. As businesses, we all understand customer experience. If we treat our customers, put them at the center, treat them well, give them good service, give them good value, they will come back and you will get loyal customers. Same principle. Our customers in this transformation journey and in BE are the skills and the small micro enterprises, small, medium, micro enterprises. So let's put them at the center of the journey and transform with them, growing, being inclusive. Next slide, please.
Thanks. I just want to quickly mention that, and that's what B-BBEE is about. It's about putting the smaller businesses in the center of everything. It's for their development, because if we develop them, we uplift the unemployment rate, we uplift communities, and we basically grow the economy. So it's vitally important to look at exponential growth and how we can actually achieve that.
Yeah, and to that point, how do we go about doing this? And it's an imperative. We could argue, I think it's been an imperative for a long time. I think COVID has made it an explicit imperative. We cannot ignore it anymore. And the imperative is we really have to address unemployment and inclusivity. We're in trouble if we don't. We have a triple crisis. So how do we do this? We need to be able to industrialize both the innovation process and development. In other words, how do we make it consistent, systemic, continuous? At the moment, it's very fragmented. There's a tremendous amount of work going on, but it's fragmented, it's duplicated, it's not continuous, it's not integrated in the whole. So the first part of it is that mindset again of how do we industrialize this to get. So back to, we've got skills development, socio-economic development, enterprise development, supply development. There's all those pools of funding from one corporate. How do we syndicate the funding? But then every large corporate has a large corporate customer or a large corporate supplier or other partners. Imagine if we could syndicate funding across multiple organizations and across multiple disciplines, and then use that to do some of the early risk development that allows us to build capability that then attracts venture capital and private equity and debt funding, which is less risk happy. So critically to this, we need to be syndicating funding. Second to that, we then need to aggregate. If we could take 3 or 4 of your programs that you've done, just as a simple example, Tanya, and we could do them 5 times or 10 times. So let's go and find another set of organizations. Let's scale the projects in those programs and aggregate it. What that also means is if we do that, then that 5,000 Rand an hour lawyer or the technology expert or the financial accountant that normally the small micro enterprises can't get access to, if we're aggregating those, we're able to then gear the expensive resources that are normally only exclusively accessible by the big corporates and make it available. And then make sure, again, the principles and the values of the transformation journey are very explicit in terms of it has to be broad-based. We have to get initiatives that the small micro enterprises don't just want to be part of the supply chain. We need to build their businesses, and we need to build new value where they are the majority shareholders. And I use a very simple example: Amazon. Jeff Bezos kind of oscillates between the first, second, third richest man in the world on the back of the value of Amazon. Amazon as a business is worth more in its market capitalization than lots of countries are able to produce. Now imagine if we had our own Amazons, and some small ones and big ones, but the micro, small, medium enterprises owned Amazon, and that wealth was now broad-based and distributed. So again, designing for those principles become very important. So a holistic, systemic outside-in approach, very, very important. And then through the different codes, how do we bridge enterprises through a small, medium, micro marketplace of entities that links the ventures, the small, medium, micro enterprises, as well as the townships and the informal sector. We've got to build these bridges together and do it cohesively. To do that, we need to accelerate ventures. We need to empower the SMEs and sustain jobs at the same time. So it's a little bit more complex, but it's very doable. Next slide, please.
And it definitely is doable. And I'm going to use myself as an example. I specialize in skills development, and it's across sectors, it's across various companies. Skills development is generic, so it's just understanding how to implement the skills. But I don't, and I often used to get, some people used to say to me, you share too much information, you give away too much of your secrets. And at the end of the day, the pie is just so big. We have a whole country that we have to look at developing, and uplifting communities. We've got a lot of disadvantaged communities in our country. And if I had to have that selfish mindset and not share my knowledge and not go out there and say, oh, you're upcoming SDF, skills development facilitator, and who's asking guidance, asking me how do they do, we won't grow. So we need to collaborate. And the pie, and when I say the pie is so big, if you look at the amount of skills development facilitators at the moment in the country, it is fluctuated. It's saturated. But we need to share our knowledge. So what I do is I actually bring in a range of different skills development facilitators, and I teach them, because I've been lucky to gain experience across various elements within the skills space. I'm able to direct them and see where does their strength lie. Let me teach them how to do a specific process, because by me teaching them means I can go out and get more business for both of us, or for 10 of us, if I am able to give that work, teach them how to do it, give them the work to do, coach and guide, but then it gives me the ability to go out and go and sell more services, to come back and say, well, now I'm not only feeding myself, I'm actually feeding a whole lot of other families by giving them that opportunity. And because I have the understanding of skill of the BEE side, I can approach companies confidently and speak to them about enterprise development and getting them to spend under enterprise development. But now opening up my ecosystem and looking at all the SMEs out there and saying to them, guys, come through and have a chat with me. Tell me what your business does. Let me understand what it does and let me connect you. Not taking any fee, because there are a lot of companies out there that take a fee for enterprise development, but not taking a fee because I know that at the end of the day, by me introducing their business to a company that has to comply with BEE, both parties are benefiting. And hey, who knows, they might come back to me and say, we need to implement skills development. So, or we'd like to develop them. How can we do that? So again, it's looking, it's not looking at it in silos anymore. And again, your socioeconomic development, looking at the projects like Kotlin, who really are around developing our children, who are going to be our future workforce. So it's going and looking at the impact that they have and how do we ensure that the impact is reaching our women, our children, and our communities. But by me going out and educating a whole lot of other skills development facilitators, I'm not looking at it as they are competitors to me. They are competitors, but I need to educate them and guide them so that we can all grow. And that takes us into understanding your slide.
Thanks, Tanya. And I think fantastic, right? So if we have the right mindsets, we're working towards inclusive, we're sharing, we're collaborating, we have the same purpose and objectives, which has to be similar. We all want to be safe. We want our children and our families and our friends to be safe. We want to make sure everybody has quality lifestyle, that we can actually have their happy lives, right? So when we start driving towards that conversation, we can start to believe in the ability to integrate and leverage BE for good. And again, that's powerful. Now, if we use what the technology and the exponential technologies and business models can do, if we were looking at the future and the future marketplace that is digitized. So again, if a big corporate is digital and the small micro enterprise is manual in its business model, it's going to not be included, right? It's going to slow down the big corporates, and the big corporate's going to say it's expensive. This is hard to deal with us. We actually we know we have to comply, but this is costly and expensive, and they don't give it attention. But if we could digitize, standardize, and digitize, productize a small, medium, micro enterprise, think of it like a franchise, and we could build a capability around that, automate that, and then instead of trying to get every little enterprise to be a big enterprise, maybe we can standardize it and get lots of little enterprises working together as if they were a big enterprise. That would bring value to the big corporate, because the corporate says, I'm ordering 100 chairs from 10 little chair manufacturers, but I'm getting the same consistent quality and response, right? For the small enterprise, they're actually able to participate, to grow their business, but they can also manage within their constraints. So building that SMME marketplace and creating the vision to do that and orchestrating the value. Again, Uber is an abused example, but it makes sense. How do we get lots of vehicles, lots of drivers, and match supply and demand between commuters and vehicles and drivers for value at a consistent way? If we apply that in our value chains between the large established industry players into building SME marketplaces that also build bridges to the underserved markets, that's on the right-hand side. How do we envisage that? How do we move towards that? How do we define that for shared and inclusive value? Then we go on to the left-hand side of the picture and say, well, what's the approach? Well, we need to syndicate funding. We have thousands, tens of thousands of practitioners and organizations. So again, Tanya, if I could use you as an example, if we could take what you do, take your knowledge, put it into an AI tool set, and scale your knowledge to another 10,000 practitioners and BE practitioners and consultants and skills development organizations, and you got a rand for each one, you're actually making money out of your knowledge, you're sharing, but you're also growing the pie for everybody, and you're helping the other guys to deliver a valuable service as well. So how do we aggregate the service providers? How do we syndicate the funding? And how do we systematically from seed to scale? So too many projects start, but very little go all the way through to scale. How do we go to seed to scale and make sure that the beneficiaries are benefiting? The next slide, please. So just as a very simple and very quick example, we did quite an extensive amount of work around the concept of a commuter marketplace. All right, looking at that previous picture. On the left-hand side, the idea was to build a marketplace that comprised the small, medium, micro enterprises. The intent is very clear that the SMMEs would own that marketplace and the innovations around it, and they would serve the corporates on the one hand, and they would serve the commuters on the other hand. From a corporate point of view, you're getting the ability to educate your employees. So if you could create businesses, digital tech businesses around the journey, the trip from work and back every single day, imagine if the corporates could educate their employees and allow their employees to be productive while they're sitting on the commute journey. It would be more cost effective for them. It would allow their employees to have a better quality of life and would overall improve productivity. Another example would be, how do you make sure that the employees are safe in their journeys backwards and back and forth between home places? You would also get a lot of insights, and to some organizations, you create an alternate channel where you can actually access the commuters. So that was just one example of 3 or 4. And then if you look at it from the commuter and the customer point of view, how do you take a journey? In the morning, you place your order so that when you get home again, you can pick up your groceries. On the way, you can do your education and your learning about the latest procedures, health and safety, product development discussion. And on the way home, you're tired and you can get some entertainment. So a couple of examples of, by looking at it holistically, standardizing, productizing, and digitizing it, you're able to do that consistently, but then scale it for the multiplier. And that's the opportunity. So it really comes down to all of us to think together, to be open to collaboration at all layers of the ecosystem, and to approach this as an ecosystem and a journey that we're all going on.
I think also,
So,
it's sorry, Shane, it's understanding that we can collaborate. All of us as practitioners, whether you're in the BE space or in the skills development space, we can all collaborate and work together so that we can fulfill the purpose that we all have, which is for transformation and for economic development. But it takes that mind shift from not considering your colleagues or that you're seeing them as companies all the time. You're all providing the same services to these businesses. So let's collaborate. If I know I have a client, but I can't service them, why be selfish and know that my competitor has a service that they can provide? We need to collaborate, and I think we really need to just shift from that mindset of just working in silos.
So thank you. Yes, I think in conclusion, and from my side, we've got 10 million plus people unemployed. We have 80 million learners coming through every year, another million odd at, say, the age of 18, 19, coming into post-school education, and then from there, if they have access. So we have a massive unemployment problem, and it continuously gets bigger and bigger every year. We have an obligation and an imperative across the whole ecosystem to make a difference. There's a massive amount of money. There's great policy in place if we align it properly. It really comes down to being open-minded and collaborating. So please, if you'd like to chat to us a little bit more, scan the QR code and get in touch with us. Liezel, over to you.
Thank you very much. Sorry, yes, Tanya, we are short of time. Yes.
Yeah. Just the link there. Everyone can also just go. If they don't scan the QR code, just click on the link. I think Liz dropped it in the chat, and engage with us if you are interested.